Front-end versus back-end development, what's the difference? Introduction. Have you ever wondered how your favorite websites are built? From the user interface to the behind-the-scenes functionality, there are countless elements that go into web development. Two key components of web development are front-end and back-end development. In this video, we'll explore the differences between these two types of development and how they work together to create the websites we know and love. Front-end development. Front-end development refers to the part of web development that is visible to the user. This includes the design, layout, and functionality of a website. Front-end developers are responsible for creating the user interface and ensuring that it is intuitive and easy to use. They work with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to create the look and feel of a website. What is HTML? HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. It is the standard markup language used to create web pages. HTML provides the structure of a website, including headings, paragraphs, and lists. What is CSS? CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. It is a style sheet language used to describe the presentation of a website. CSS is used to control the layout, color, and typography of a website. What is JavaScript? JavaScript is a programming language used to create interactive elements on a website. It can be used to create animations, validate forms, and even build entire web applications. Back-end development. Back-end development refers to the part of web development that is not visible to the user. This includes the server-side programming, database management, and other behind-the-scenes elements that power a website. Back-end developers work with programming languages like PHP, Ruby, and Python to build the functionality of a website. What is a server? A server is a computer program that provides services to other computer programs and their users in the same or other computers. It is also known as a host or remote computer. A web server stores and delivers the content of a website to a user's device. What is a database? A database is an organized collection of data. It stores information in a structured format and allows for efficient retrieval and manipulation of that data. A database is essential for most web applications as it allows for the storage and retrieval of user data. What is a programming language? A programming language is a formal language that is used to write computer programs. Programming languages are used to create software, websites, and other computer applications. Front-end versus back-end development, what's the difference? Now that we've explored the basics of front-end and back-end development, let's take a closer look at the differences between the two. Focus. Front-end development is focused on creating the user interface and making sure that it is intuitive and easy to use. Back-end development is focused on creating the behind-the-scenes functionality that powers a website. Technologies used. Front-end developers use HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to create the user interface of a website. Back-end developers use programming languages like PHP, Ruby, and Python to build the functionality of a website. Skill sets required. Front-end developers need to have strong design and programming skills. They must be familiar with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript and be able to create responsive and user-friendly designs. Back-end developers need to have strong programming skills and be familiar with programming languages like PHP, Ruby, and Python. Collaboration. Front-end and back-end development are two sides of the same coin. Both are essential to the creation of a functional and visually appealing website. While front-end developers focus on the user interface, back-end developers focus on the server-side programming and database management. However, both front-end and back-end developers must work together to ensure that a website is functional and meets the needs of its users. User experience. Front-end development is all about the user experience. Front-end developers must create a visually appealing and intuitive user interface that makes it easy for users to navigate a website. Back-end development is focused on creating the functionality that powers a website. Without the back-end, the front-end would be useless. Testing and debugging. Front-end and back-end developers both need to test and debug their code to ensure that a website is functional and free of errors. Front-end developers need to test their code across different browsers and devices to ensure that it works properly. Back-end developers need to test their code to ensure that it is secure and efficient. Conclusion. In conclusion, front-end and back-end development are two sides of the same coin. Both are essential to the creation of a functional and visually appealing website. Front-end development is focused on creating the user interface and ensuring that it is intuitive and easy to use. Back-end development is focused on creating the behind-the-scenes functionality that powers a website. Together, front-end and back-end developers work together to ensure that a website is functional, visually appealing, and meets the needs of its users. Whether you're a front-end or back-end developer, both skill sets are in high demand and can lead to rewarding and fulfilling careers in web development.